There you are. It's been a while. Okay, welcome, my baking friends. I've had a couple of requests to do decorated sugar cookies, do a video on them. So I'm getting ready to make some for an event, and I thought this is the perfect time to take you through the process of things. So we're going to start with the recipe that I use for cutouts that bake flat, they're soft, and they're delicious. And then we'll talk about icing and decorating and all of the things. This is going to be a little bit longer of a video, but if you were into decorating cookies with royal icing and or just looking for a good recipe, stick around with us. Now, as always, I'm making a bigger batch. I'm doubling this because I want to make lots of cookies to sell at this event. I will say and put on the screen here the ingredients that you need for a single batch of dough. But honestly, if you doubled this, you'd make a lot. So definitely at the holidays, just go ahead and double it. You're gonna start with a stick and a half of unsalted, softened butter. Then you are going to cream this with 3/4 of a cup of white granulated sugar. And you want this to mix really well until it's a nice pale color before you add anything else. All right, they've been creamed together and I scraped down my paddle and my bowl. And then you are going to crack in 1 egg. Put it on stir and mix that. And we're gonna add a bunch of the other ingredients while it's mixing in the egg so that we don't overbeat the egg. All right, 1/4 teaspoon salt. Then you need 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. In we go. 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And remember, you can use other extracts here as well if you want them to have a different flavor. You could use orange extract, almonds very popular, lemon, maple, anything like that. Let that mix. And then I have added my own little twist to this recipe, which people really like, and that is about 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. I know that sounds odd. It doesn't overpower anything, but I do think it adds something to it. So just a little bit of cinnamon. The final ingredient is our all-purpose flour. We need 2 1/4 cup. Put that in. It should come together pretty quickly. And then what we're going to do is, I like to take plastic wrap, lay it out, put the dough on top, kind of flatten it out, wrap it in plastic wrap, and we're going to chill it in the fridge for about 2 hours before rolling it out to use it to do all of our cutout shapes. All right, our dough is chilled, and I have taken it out of the fridge and let it sit 15 minutes before working with it. It's still going to be quite tough to work with when it's cold until it warms up a little. You'll have to use a little muscle. You got this. Flour your surface, and I like to put a little on the rolling pin, just like that. And we're gonna roll this baby out. You can roll them to whatever thickness you want, but something that's like, I would say pretty standard, and what I do is 1/4 inch. And it should not be overly sticky. If it's super sticky, you may not have added enough flour and or it didn't get a chance to chill long enough. So I just kind of use the palms of my hand to push down. Then what I'll do is kind of form it into a disc. Make sure we're good and floured, and start to roll it out. I always do pressure in the center and then work my way. And I like to do quarter turn rotates. Quarter turn rotates. I like to do quarter turns. So I'll roll out a little, spin it, also let you slide some flour underneath it. And then just keep going like this. Once you have it rolled out to the desired thickness, that is when you're gonna take your cookie cutters. So I'm going to a strawberry festival, and I do these every year, and they're very popular. I do a mason jar, make it look like it's filled with strawberry lemonade, and strawberries, and a little lemon. And then you know how to use a cookie cutter? Push it down, give it a little wiggle, pull it up. It should fall right out. And then you have a beautiful cookie. Put them on your tray, leave about 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch between them. They should not expand. They should bake just as they are, and like I said, bake up nice and flat. Bake them at 350 for 10 minutes. Check, you may need a little bit longer. I do mine for 10, but I have a higher efficiency oven. So check, you might want to do 12. They should be lightly browning around the edges. That will make them nice and brown on the bottom, but they will be perfect and soft and delicious. And then once they're cool, ready to decorate. So with the cookies done, it's time to talk royal icing. Royal icing is meringue powder with a little bit of corn syrup and powdered sugar and a little bit of vanilla, plus some water. I use Jeannie's Dream meringue powder, which I just got off Amazon. This came highly suggested and recommended by fellow cookiers that I follow, and I just switched to this and started using it and really enjoy it. How you make it, the directions are all right here on the back of the package. I literally just followed everything it said, so you can do that too, and you will have gorgeous royal icing. Wilton also makes some meringue powder, and that's what I used to use. If you use a Wilton powder, it's 3 tablespoons of the powder to 4 cups of powdered sugar, a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of corn syrup, and water to get whatever consistency you're looking for. So with royal icing, there are different consistencies. You can do a stiffer consistency for outlines and details. Then the more water you add, the thinner it gets, and the closer it gets towards what we call a flood consistency. And that is to fill in and flood large spaces on your cookie. When I started, I did 2 consistencies. I did the stiffer and then a flood. I have now moved on to doing a 1 consistency for outline and flood, so it all kind of blends in together. But if you're just starting, 2 consistencies is probably best to give you some chance to learn and to really create a nice outline to hold that icing in. So once your icing is mixed, like I said, you control the consistency. You make it however stiff or loose you would like. And when I'm doing details on top of cookies and such, I always use stiffer. So right now I'm in between a stiff and a full flood. And so I can add water to it to make it looser, or add a little bit of powdered sugar if I want to make it a little stiffer. Once you mix up this icing, it does need to be covered because obviously it will dry out and harden. That's what we want it to do on the cookies, but that's not what you want it to do. So I always like to make mine, put it in a container, put a lid on it, and then always stir it before using it. Of course, you can dye this any color you want. I suggest using water-based gel colors. You get the most vibrancy, and they're not going to bleed quite as much. And I'll show you some different techniques if you would like in another video with cookies, but I will show you a little bit on how you would outline and flood so you kind of have the basis if you want to try this on your own. All right, so here's my lemon cookie. You can see I've already done one, and I have my yellow in a bag. I've just cut the tip off the bag. I don't use any tips for most of what I do unless I'm doing a specific shape. All right, we're gonna try and narrate this at the same time. But we're gonna start with an outline and just whatever is most comfortable for you. If you wanna keep it close to the cookie, keep it close to the cookie. If you feel like you need to stop, you can't go all the way around at one time, that's fine. You can see I haven't gone all the way to the edge. Don't worry, I will. And remember, I'm using all one consistency. If you're using a stiffer consistency, this is where we want to use it, and then use your flood inside. But because I'm using all one consistency, I am now just going to go more up and down with my piping bag and squeeze with more pressure. And you can see why flat cookies are really important, because otherwise you would have icing running off the sides. Instead, it all sits where it needs to. Now you can see there are little gaps. You can take a toothpick, it doesn't have to be any, fancy stylus or anything. But then I just kind of move the icing, and this is where I will push it a little bit closer to the edge. For me, I can tend to overfill. That's how easy it is to outline and flood. And then once these are dry, I'll go back on over top and do some like little dots and bumps to be more like a real lemon, give them some texture and some life. But yeah, so that's how I use the one consistency. You can get this same look if you use two different consistencies. And once these dry, which they shouldn't take too long, they should still be nice, smooth, and a little bit glossy. So it's gonna give a really nice finish to your cookies. Okay, I wanted to add one little clip in here. So this is a few days later, Devin. So here, I have green, and this is a very stiff consistency, and I've cut a leaf tip into it to do the tops of these strawberries. So here's what they look like right now. Aren't they cute? But they need leaves and they need their seeds. So I'm going to use this really stiff consistency for the leaves so that they hold some structure and some shape, which really give them like this realistic dimension. Look at that. So that is just, I added a little bit more powdered sugar to my original mix, and you can tell like that's nice and stiff, and then that will dry and still have that leaf texture. So that is something that, like, the difference between like an outline and flood versus something stiffer can do for your cookies. A little bit stiffer can be better for writing and details as well. So don't be afraid to experiment with it. That's the biggest learning curve, in my opinion, with decorated sugar cookies, is finding what consistencies work for you for what you want to do. Okay? So go forth and decorate.